Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright and sunny day. It is Saturday the 30th of March and I'm in the Read Nook with a nice hot cup of tea and something a little bit special to unbox, which is this. The note is because it's for me, from my friend Lee, who managed to find me a copy of this, Tunnels and Trolls. This is one of the box sets published by Flying Buffalo, and what you've got inside is a guide. What's in this box? So essentially, it's got Tunnels and Trolls 5th edition rulebook, Solitaire Dungeon, Buffalo Castle, Game Master Dungeon, the Game Master Dungeon, Dungeon of the Bear Level 1, and 6 pre-rolled Tunnels and Trolls characters. Now, what it doesn't have is all of the pre-rolled characters, from what I'm told, but I paid a reasonable price for this because it's in such lovely condition. Now, this was published in 1980. It's the 5th edition, 2nd printing, and it's actually published by Chris Harvey Games, which was the distributor of Tunnels and Trolls and Flying Buffalo games throughout this period. And essentially trying to find an earlier edition in a reasonable condition is difficult. But there isn't a lot of difference between the different editions, not a huge amount anyway. So you have this sheet. What's in this box? Always love those because it's always a great introduction. You basic anticipation. What is this? And then we have the rule book in the classical kind of style. You have Buffalo Castle, which is the 1st edition, first adventure written specifically for solitaire play, designed for use for Tunnels and Trolls. Dungeon of the Bear Level 1, actually done a sort of like a little pamphlet and folder, and I've got some extra things in here. Naked Doom, which was another solo adventure, and then you've got the character sheets. So actually, the 6 that are in here, because essentially there's 2 per sheet. It shows you just how small a Tunnels and Trolls character sheet is. So that's it. And the idea always was that you could write down what was on your character sheet on an index card. So you've got six of those, and then on the back of that you've got a list of what was available. Flying Buffalo series of solo adventures. So the question is, why have I got a copy of Tunnels and Trolls? Well, it's interesting that as I sit here, it's the 30th of March 2024, it's the Easter weekend, and I managed to obtain this with a view to actually doing a proper review of this in 2025, because that will be the 50th anniversary of the original publication of Tunnels and Trolls, 1975. Came out a year after Dungeons and Dragons, so one of the very earliest of role-playing games. And since this is essentially the 5th edition, 2nd printing, it's kind of like this has been tweaked and adjusted slightly, but as I recall, there won't be a lot of changes between the editions. It's all very minor. But let's have a look in a little bit more detail what we've got in here. And essentially, as it says, completely revised and re-illustrated. That's the main thing in it. What does it say on the back? So this doesn't actually have anything on the back, so it's going to read off the rulebook. So, what is Tunnels and Trolls? Tunnels and Trolls is a fantasy role-playing game. All right then, what's a fantasy role-playing game? There's the crux of it. This is Ken St. Andre, well-known designer. Also designed things like Stormbringer. There's the crux of it. A fantasy role-playing game is one in which the players, sometimes one, often several, can assume the personas and personalities of imaginary beings, not always human, who are thus given lives and adventures of their own, directed by the game players. In the course of the game, characters, the imaginary ones, are presented with circumstances created in outline by a game master. The fulfillment of that outline depends upon a verbal give and take between the game master and the players as they explore the world presented. taking actions to cope with the situations in which they find themselves. The game master is a real person who has taken the time to create the scenarios in which his or her friends can play. The players may be using medieval knights, spacefaring aliens, or a cowpuncher from the Old West. Tunnels and Trolls is designed primarily as a fantasy role-playing game set in a somewhat medieval alternate universe in the tradition of the hero tales of Greece and Rome, the Norse sagas and the Eddas, childhood fairy tales, and in the more modern traditions of the heroic fantasy of J.R.R. Tolkien and Robert E. Howard. The fundamental framework for adventuring in Tunnels and Trolls is the concept of the underground tunnel complex, wherein the dangerous traps and deadly monsters guard undreamed of treasures, where magic and high sorcery meet sword and shield in alliances or as violent opponents. Those who survive to regain the surface may be considered winners until the next time they venture into the depths, risking all for glory, gold, and adventure. The rules to play Tunnels and Trolls are complete with the booklet in your hands. You need never purchase anything else, and you will have the entire game available to you. On the other hand, there are numerous backup services, among them Solitaire Dungeon Adventures, miniatures, and a magazine dedicated primarily to TNT, but those are meant to augment the game. Here is all you'll need. We hope you enjoy the game. So this is where the author Kevin I'm afraid, is declaring, this is complete. This is everything you need to play. You don't need to buy anything more than this. You don't need to buy any extra adventures. You don't need to buy extra supplements to play, etc. And it was written as his response to Dungeons & Dragons, thinking, I can do better. So, Tunnels and Trolls, a sword and sorcery roleplay. There you go. Just the credits. I've got dedication to Liz Danforth, and then the credits. And I've got an introduction to the basic rules, with troll talk, and it's quite a dense little book, but it's not difficult to read from what I remember, because I've not looked at this, I suppose, since in 40 years now, something like that, when I was playing it back in my third year of the grammar school. So, character creation, as you can see, it's using those little cards, the index cards, to create very quite simple characters. Then move on to equipping characters, provisions of equipment, general supplies. It's a single page. Where it gets kind of funky is all the different weapons from all over the place. And what you're doing there is going, choosing something based entirely on cost and how many dice you're going to roll to do damage. And also whether or not you meet the minimum strength and dex requirement. So you've got quite a long list of weapons, including, swords, straight swords, unusual swords, gentlemen's or town swords, hafted weapons, slicing heads, stabbing heads, smashing heads, pole weapons, spears, daggers. Then we do the same for projectile weapons. We've got a section on poisons. Armor and shields a bit shorter. Then we go on to creating monsters, and we've got a list of monsters there. If my recollection would be, there weren't enough monsters in the game, but then we move on to combat, and really what you're trying to do in here is roll great handfuls of six-sided dice and roll greater than the other side. And what that does is it reduces their combat values and reduces the number of dice they have to roll. So it's a game of attrition and so on. So you've got an explanation of combat, you've got an example of combat thrown in there, and then after all of that, adventure points. Essentially, this is what you're earning through combat and daring. Then we have a discussion of saving throws. Saving rolls in this are essentially of kind of like a skill saving thing. Natural developments, the game as it is played. So here we're actually talking about character types. So you have warriors, wizards, and rogues. Rogues are a mixture of the two, sort of like kind of a bit of a mix of the two. And then we've got warrior wizards, and then we allow for character kindreds, so race or species, and that includes humans, dwarves, elves, fairies, hobbits, and leprechauns. Height and weight, character levels, magic and how that works in the world of Tunnels and Trolls. Spell book, and we go through the list of spells level by level. So, and one of the things that Tunnels and Trolls, one of the things about it is that the spell names are notoriously kind of a bit silly. So, you know, open doors is knock knock. Find object is, oh, there it is. And then a damage dealing spell is take that, you fiend. I mean, there are some that you would rename these days. For example, Yasa Masa, yeah, you would rename that because that's essentially that would be interpreted today as racist. But I mean, essentially, that's the sort of like, you know, that's the charm person, control, enslave. Yeah, no. Spell, and the spells will go all the way up to, you've got level 15, 16, all the way up to level 20 with the spell Born Again. You know, which is basically reincarnate spell. And then sequence of events, combat sequence, having things like surprise attacks, magic, missile weapons, and you've got an example of play. As I say, it's quite a dense book, but actually not that difficult to read, as I recall. Got actually multiple examples of how the mechanics work, so you get a good understanding. Move on to magic in combat, handling missile weapons, unarmed combat, what to do when you're wielding two heavy weapons, speed and movement in play, unusual combat situations, how to deal with them, more about monsters, how to personalize monsters. And you know what I said about not enough monsters. Actually, there's more monsters here. It's later in the book. It just felt. I mean, my first impression is exactly that, because essentially I've not looked at this seriously in 40 years. Because obviously, you know, moved on to be, you know, playing lots of other games, throwing in Wandering Monsters, and then how to be a game master, what to do when you get out of the dungeon, and then a little mini dungeon as an example. There we go. So you could actually play through that, and then chapter 3, elaborations. So we move on to more about city, world, and dungeon building. You've got treasure generator, how to use miniatures, how to handle languages in Tunnels and Trolls, the effects of charisma, alternate humanoid characters. So basically, you know, yeah, if you wanted to, you could play an ogre or one of Lovecraft's ghouls if you wanted to. Auxiliary characters, that does include slaves, that does include hirelings. I mean, that's an effect essentially of this being a sword and sorcery supplement rather than anything else. What happens when you throw in berserker, fighting, time and aging, using firearms, marksmanship and accuracy, other materials for weapons and armour, and then you've got a weapons glossary. I can remember poring over that and reading with interest. Then we have an index, Sorcerer's Apprentice, advert for the magazine, and that's it. That's your Tunnels and Trolls core rulebook. So, there are a couple of things which in here which have not aged well, and so you wouldn't have them. You wouldn't have them in your game now. You could still run this and enjoy it and play it. I think it'd be quite fun. I did play it. I think about trying to think. Would have been about 6-7 years ago at a convention. I didn't actually want to play that game. It was my very last choice. But I got into it and I played it and I enjoyed it. there was about 10 of us playing it, so it lends itself to, because the mechanics are quite simple. It lends itself to quite a big kind of group, and because you just have throwing great handfuls of 6-sided dice. The mechanics aren't that complex, and you can have a lot of fun with it. I think that yeah, that would be interesting to play again. I think, and even run it again. So essentially the other things we've got in here, we've got Buffalo Castle and Dungeon there. I think they are going to be worth looking at on their own, so I'm going to come back to that in another video. Now, the other thing to note about Tunnels and Trolls, about this box set, so basically want to get around to reviewing it. By the time that's done, hopefully there will be a new edition. There will be a 50th anniversary edition published by Rebellion Games. Rebellion have already published a couple of mini sort of like role-playing scenarios as magazine format, and Tunnels and Trolls is going to be their big entry into the role-playing market with the resolution of a classic. In the meantime, I'm going to what I'm planning to do essentially is I'm going to review this. I've got the most recent edition from 2017, I think, the deluxe version. I want to do that because there's also a Tunnels and Trolls Japan supplement, which I've had for about 6 years, which I've never been able to review because I've not reviewed the core rules, but I want to get to them and see what they are like. It's all about time. Anyway, that is Tunnels and Trolls, the box set, published in 1980, originally in 1975, which I look forward to really giving a review for 2025. Anyway, thanks for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you enjoyed this, then please do click on the like button. And of course, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings essentially, if you've got any comments or feedback, do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And of course, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with typically with a box, or in this case, from which I will unbox a role-playing game or role-playing supplement and talk about it to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, or in this case, an actual boxed role-playing game from 40 years ago, which I will unbox and chat about. Then please do click on the subscribe button down below. And of course, it will be accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Lastly, thanks to Lee for helping me obtain this copy. That was very helpful. In the meantime, thanks again for watching another unboxing the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.